so we're ready to go?
Oh.
All right, I guess I'll get right into the meat and bones of it.
Are we rolling?
Yeah,
rolling?
We
we're
are.
all good, yeah.
I'm looking at
so-
you.
Yeah. So 33rd Street, the first thing I ever read about you, it was an article, it was you and Schaefer, and it was you who was championing for 33rd Street, so.
No. We were downtown, Port Covington.
In terms of
Location.
location,
This had Eastern High School.
Well,
it's, in the article that I read, I can.
go ahead, go ahead.
It said you were fighting for 33rd Street, Schaefer was fighting for Camden Yards, so.
I was fighting for Port Covington.
Okay, then can you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay. I was privy at one point in time to see plans and drawings that a new ballpark would go at Port Covington because it was 147 acres of railroad property, wasn't on tax rolls. And I was over there with people from the State Department of Transportation for ingress, egress, and the Chessie system had it up for sale at the time. And a lot of rumors were coming out of City Hall that could be the potential location. And I'd met with a couple of businessmen that said, have you seen the Port Covington site? It's in your district, and would you support it if it goes there? And I said, yes.
Was there something about Camden Yards that you didn't like as much about it?
No, I didn't have an objection to Camden Yards because after we got to the point where we did repeal the charter to allow for construction of a ballpark anywhere but 33rd Street, that both were in play. Was it going to be Camden or was it going to be Port Covington? And it turned out to be Camden. But they talked about Camden Yards in the 70s as a location, and that's what started the process, in effect, that the then city controller, Hyman Pressman, was opposed to a new ballpark. So he had a resolution passed into the city charter that said you could only build on 33rd Street. When we got into the 80s after the Colts left town, and there was apprehension that we could lose the Orioles too if we didn't get a new stadium, that's when the administration at the time, Mayor Schaefer was still, he had a task force that was studying the need to perhaps renovate Memorial Stadium as opposed to a new stadium. But a group that I was involved with that was actually called a Fans for a Sports Complex, we were advocating a new ballpark, but you couldn't build it anywhere but 33rd Street, according to the then charter as written. So question O went to the voters in 1986, and we repealed the amendment in the charter that allowed for the construction anywhere else in the city.
So you were a city councilman. What were you hearing from your constituents about where they wanted a stadium, if they wanted a new stadium, their thoughts and feelings about the sports?
Everybody,
atmosphere?
people were so apprehensive that we were going to lose the baseball team after we had lost the football team. They were in support of building a new stadium.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me a little bit more about the charter and how you were actually able to, get it amended into referendum?
Well, the way any citizen can get a question on referendum, there's two ways. One, you'd have to get 10,000 signatures of registered voters, which means you probably got to get a lot more than 10,000 to make sure they're all authentic. Or you do a resolution of the mayor and city council, which has to be passed through the council and signed by the mayor. So that's what we did in the council, and it went through a normal process. It went to, I remember back then it was Councilman Don Hammond in the 1st District, chaired the committee that had the hearing on the resolution. It came through committee and then went out to the voters. And it passed 62 to 38 citywide.
And a little bit more about the actual location. I know some people were, advocating that it go outside the city limits, maybe to the suburbs, maybe closer to DC. Why do you think it was so important that the ballpark stay in Baltimore? Why was that important?
Well, everybody can see how important it is today. You got to generate the revenue that a professional sports team brings, and that's why after the question O, then we brought the Ravens in, which turned out to be the Ravens, of course, to get the NFL to bring a football team here. It's everything that's associated with having professional sports teams. You're not just a big league city, in quotes, to the world, but the property tax and the sales tax and the revenue generated at the hotels and motels and people coming in from out of town to come to the ballparks is what stimulates the economy.
And then kind of what was left over was an empty Memorial Stadium. So were there any opinions on what you thought should be done with the stadium or what your constituents were saying about?
No, because it turned out, I think, down the road, the Ripken group got a hold of that, and they still have a ballpark out there, and there's a lot of events out there. I think there's a YMCA as part of that location. The only thing I was a little disappointed in when we lost Memorial Stadium, and we put a resolution in back at the time to bring the facade of Memorial Stadium down to the new ballpark. So it would still have, we named it Veterans Place in effect, but the facade itself never moved. I think it was too hard. The letters were old or whatever. There is a stripe of the lettering at the new ballparks that says it's dedicated to the veterans.
And a little bit more about Memorial Stadium. Obviously, it became empty because teams stopped using it first. The Colts moved out. Do you remember where you were when the Colts moved out that day in Baltimore, what the feeling was like?
I remember that morning when I met the mayor, and he was very, very agitated, of course, because at the time he never expected the Colt owner, Robert Irsay, to leave. Mr. Irsay, they were back and forth. Mr. Irsay wanted a new ballpark, wanted a new football stadium, and made it clear. But he would tell Schaefer, Mr. Schaefer, that he's not going to move the team. He's just not going to move it. There's plenty of video on that he said publicly he won't move the team, but apparently he was already in negotiations to do that, and he took off. I do know that he had talked to a local moving company, but this was after the fact, and had approached them about moving the team prior to the day that he did leave. And when he found out that it would be an uproar and that corporation wasn't going to move the team because they were local, and then he called Mayflower, and then it just turned out that that given day, when they left, it was quote unquote under the cover of darkness or whatever. But he was going to go with Mayflower whenever he could get the team loaded up and go. That's what he did.
Can you guys ask memories of Memorial Stadium? Ask Joe's memories of, well, either one of you.
Yeah, I guess I'll stay here.
Okay.
You know, I guess what were your memories of Memorial Stadium when you were in there, what the feeling was like, what you thought of it?
Oh, Memorial Stadium at the time was the heartbeat of the city, without a doubt. I mean, when the Orioles came here in 1954, and you're growing up with that, everybody that grew up with the Orioles, they were not a good team originally because they had to get expansion team players, and they finished 7th out of 8th. Nobody cared. We just had a baseball team, and you couldn't wait to get to the ballpark. And the Colts were big. The Colts came the year before. The Colts got really good and won the championship of the NFL in 1958 and again in 1959. And the Colts at the time were more popular than the Orioles at Memorial Stadium. It was going to a Colt game was like a religion. I was fortunate. I was part of the Southern Police Boys Club as a teenager growing up, and they used to take 20 of us out to the Colt games every week. All the boys club had tickets, and you had to be good behavior and a good student and not a good participant with the clubs, and you could get on the bus and go to the games, and it was the most exciting thing growing up. Of course, then in the 60s when the Orioles, one thing I do want to say about the Orioles, how great they became. They were in the World Series 4 times between 1966 and 1971. They won twice. The first one, of course, was they beat the Dodgers in 4 straight. The first game, Mo Drabowski came on in relief and shut the Dodgers out from the 3rd inning on. From that time that he took the mound, the Dodgers never scored a run the rest of the World Series. We shut them out game 2, 3, and 4.
So the next part of our conversation is about Mayor and Governor Schaefer. I guess going back a little bit to what you talked about with his reaction to the Colts leaving, can you sort of take me through what that day was like? It
was like losing. It was like losing a person in your life almost. That's how much the team meant to the city, because the Colts were tremendously popular, and he was surprised and disappointed, obviously. And the discussion that day evolved over, was it too late to put in an ordinance and call for eminent domain on the team itself as it was on its way to Indianapolis, to see if we could at least get it in the court system to retain it. But it was too late. Once they crossed state lines, they didn't belong to Baltimore anymore. So I think he was just genuinely very, very disappointed.
And I think what Ryan mentioned about 33rd Street, just reading it, seemed like that was maybe like a brief point, and it says 85, where you suggested maybe that would be a good compromise in some sort of press conference with Schaefer.
Well, he wanted to renovate Memorial Stadium,
Mm-hmm.
or as opposed to a new stadium at the time, and he had a task force that looked at that. And when he and I would talk, when he said, continue with your effort to repeal the charter amendment to allow for the construction of the new ballpark, wherever it might be. And in other words, he never came out against that. So we really had discussed with one another, let's just leave it to the voters. If the question had failed, you have to do something on 33rd Street. But since it passed and the charter amendment was repealed, then it just paved the way. And he became governor that same election. The question no was on the ballot. And then he embraced it from there, and then made sure that the Stadium Authority would be created and the necessary funds come together to build Oriole Park.
And there was at least one instance, I think it was Professor Berniski actually wrote about it, where you two had a disagreement in public.
Well,
what would you sort of describe that relationship like?
We had a close relationship. We had a very close relationship, and that's why if he was irked by me, he would just like if we were sitting together and had known each other for a long time, he'd say, well, no, and we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. And that passed, that faded away, and everything got resolved.
And his leadership style, the way he went about things, is certainly talked about a lot. What do you think it was like for anyone to sort of oppose William Donald Schaefer at that time? How challenging would that have been?
He was demonstrative as a mayor. I mean, he really was. He was firm, and I liked that. Everybody liked that about him. You knew what you were going to get when you were involved with him. And as far as anything we wanted to do, if he was upset with you, you'd worried about whether or not you're going to get constituent services in your district. But he would never threaten that. But you had that fear. What if I'm not on the good side of the boss, in effect? So you talk things out and repair damage if there was any. I would get together with him at his Edgewood house more than anybody would ever know, to make sure that we always had a good rapport, regardless of what the public was hearing about renovate or build a new one and stuff like that. And we always talked about it.
Gotcha. And then as a whole throughout the process, how integral do you think, Mayor and Governor Schaefer was to the creation of Oriole Park?
Oh, without him, I don't think it would have been done. He was the driving force once he became the governor.
And why is that?
Well, because you had to have funding, you had to have legislature in your corner, you had to work with the delegates and the senators. I mean, it was a step up, obviously, from when he was mayor, but the governor has to sign everything into law in order to do what we did to create the Stadium Authority and then build it.
So do you think part of it was having someone who was originally from Baltimore, then moving to the state government? Do you think that Baltimore, maybe history or connection, was a big part?
Well, yes and no, because at the time we were going through the process to repeal the charter amendment, Governor Harry Hughes was governor, and we worked with some of his people and talked with him, and they were supportive too. So it's I think whoever was governor would have come on board at the time, because we were just afraid we were going to lose the baseball team.
Gotcha. And then you mentioned having talks with him. How would you sort of say you went about expressing the viewpoint of your constituents to him? Was that received well, and how effective do you think that was?
Oh, he never really was against what we were doing, but his committee and the council people from the 2nd and 3rd district that would be more in favor of keeping Memorial Stadium in their districts They would talk about it in different council lunches and mayor's luncheons. But I think when they found out it was going to cost like $54 million just to renovate Memorial Stadium, they realized, you know, we got to move ahead. We got to get a new stadium because that's what the state of the art called for.
All right, so I know Eli just kind of touched on Mayor Schaefer and Governor Schaefer's impact on the creation of the stadium, but how monumental do you think the city council was in sort of bringing those agendas along in the creation of the stadium from that viewpoint?
Well, to the extent that we had to repeal a charter, it was totally important, and the entire council supported the resolution. So even though they might have preferred in the 3rd District to keep Memorial Stadium as the home of professional sports, they also, everybody kind of came together. Even Mr. Pressman, the comptroller, who put the charter amendment in 1974 that blocked construction of a new ballpark anywhere but 33rd Street, came out in support of our crusade to repeal the amendment. So the council on board was as a whole, and the mayor signed the resolution as well.
Right, and say that you guys didn't get this done and a new stadium wasn't built and the Orioles left Baltimore, how monumental do you think that would have been for the city?
Well, we wouldn't be a major league town anymore. We certainly wouldn't be where we are with the Ravens and with the Orioles, as dynamic as both teams are. I mean, you've got to have professional sports to be a big league city. I mean, that sounds like almost a pun, but it's true.
Did the city, so the city, in your opinion, you think it supported wholeheartedly no matter the cost to bring that stadium?
Well, as long as the taxpayer didn't want to be burdened with it, and we had to come up with numerous ways to pay for the ballpark. And it's mostly through general obligation bonds, and that's what ended up happening.
Can you describe that a little bit more, the general obligation bonds and the other ways that?
Can I get that paperwork? Just the one on top is the. We advocated back in 1986, revenue bonds, hotel motel taxes, a sales tax with a sunset clause, that anything that the legislature might be able to get in an incremental time period to help us with a slight increase in sales tax on whatever, you know. You read today's papers and you'll find out how desperate they are to try to raise taxes just to make the budget be balanced. But Sky Suites, which ballparks never really had at the time, we got park and ride revenue, transportation, hopefully a state appropriation. We had met with people in Congress back then about federal funding, and then we talked about the possibility that the Port Covington property wasn't on the tax rolls, so property taxes would come and stimulate revenue from that if that had been chosen as a site.
So given all these ways that the stadium would have to be paid for, did you at all think that the creation of the stadium would be too expensive?
No, I never worried about that because I say, and I'm harping on it a little bit, the referendum question was the barometer. And if the citizens were opposed to the construction of a new ballpark, they would have let the charter stay intact and then would have had to renovate Memorial Stadium.
And then last question, a little bit more personal to you. It was mentioned in an article, I have it here, it was from 1986. It mentioned that you had your eye on a higher office in Maryland. Was there anything during that specific time, maybe related to the ballpark, the mood of the city, that made you feel so passionate that you wanted to do that at the time?
Now, I felt that if I was going to have a career in government, that I would run higher for office one day, which I did do in 1995. I ran for city council president. And I guess some of my internal feeling at the time was that if we passed Question O citywide and Gil Griggs and a citizens committee that got together with us to do that, I thought maybe that same base of support could help me if I tried to move higher in office in Baltimore City.
And then lastly, could you just describe the relationship between the city and the state government in Maryland and how they were able to kind of come together to be able to fund this new ballpark?
Well, when William Donald Schaefer became governor, it got easier because he inherently knew everything that had gone on as a mayor, and he just took the reins from there and got his support from the General Assembly.
So next sort of set of topics is opening day. Just what that first game at Oriole Park at Camden Yards was like. Can you sort of tell me what you were doing on that day, where you were, take me through what it was like?
I was there. I was there, and a lot of different people asked me if I was going to go to the game and where would I sit with. I turned out going with my family, and it was just unbelievable, really, to walk in and see a sellout crowd, and baseball was back in a different location. But I mean, it was bittersweet in a way, but it was just like moving into a new house, really. Nobody wants to leave, would not leave their old neighborhood to go somewhere else. You guys, if you change schools and you graduate here and you go there, that was the same kind of an atmosphere. But there was no animosity. I couldn't sense any animosity because the move had to be made to keep the baseball team. So everybody had some pride in the new ballpark.
And do you remember where in the stadium you sat?
I know I was about maybe 20 rows back from first base, but I was invited, from different people who had tickets and said, sit with me for a little bit. I was moving around a lot in the ballpark, but I wasn't up close. It wasn't no special thing,
Gotcha. So did you get a ticket the normal,
Just like anybody else, yep.
And who were some of the people you went around talking with?
Well, people knew who we were, different fans, different people from the neighborhood you'd run into. Everybody was at the ballpark, it seemed. Yeah. No one in particular,
And how would you say that opening day differed from the rest of, the regular opening day?
Oh, opening day is always exciting. I see opening day almost the same way as that opening day would have been. Opening day is one of the biggest days that we experience here in football and baseball. I think more baseball because it's more games, and everybody like right now is looking forward to opening day right now. It's just a big deal. People want to be part of opening day.
So you don't think there's necessarily something added to that excitement because of the new ballpark? Do you think that shifted?
Well, prior to its official opening, there was a couple exhibition games that were played there. And I was fortunate to get over there with the then Stadium Authority Director, Bruce Huffman, to see what was going on with the construction at some points in time and how the seating was going to be and the left field wall and et cetera, et cetera. So seeing the stadium itself, I'd already been in the park a little. So that part didn't intrigue me as much as just the fact that the team was playing at Oriole Park.
And when were those exhibition games?
Oh, maybe 2 weeks prior.
And can you sort of take me through your thought process when you first saw it? Got there for the first time and saw the completed Camden Yards?
Well, we were proud. I guess I would say we were proud, that here it is, and we kept the team. And it was just, I looked at the entire thing as the role that we took on was almost a responsibility after Mr. Gil Griggs sent us the information to say if we didn't repeal the charter, we're not going to keep the team. He's the guy, he should get all the credit. I just took what he was telling us we needed to do and put it in play and got it through the legislative process.
And can you tell me a little bit about how he got in contact with you and what his role?
He wrote, as I say, he wrote a letter to everybody and I responded to him. We started having meetings and it just grew from there. He had a base of support. He had his own committee of fans together and we would meet. And I'll tell you who else was very instrumental was a reporter at the News American, John Stedman. And there's a Hall of Fame, Maryland Hall of Fame award named after him. A Lifetime Achievement Award is the John F. Stedman Award. And he advocated a new stadium day in and day out in the newspaper and on his radio show. And he occasionally would have Gil or me on his radio shows, and we would take questions from fans along the way to see what the temperature was. Are you for it or are you against it? And there would be a core that was said we want to keep Memorial Stadium, and another core on how we're going to pay for it. But then the biggest, I guess, what ultimately put it over the top, again, was the referendum because 62 to 38, we repealed the charter, which meant to us we want a new stadium in Baltimore.
Gotcha. And was Gil just sort of normal
Oh,
Baltimore?
yeah, Gil was a strong fan, and if he hadn't written to all of us, I don't know what the ultimate outcome would have been because I wasn't aware of that my time in the council. When he said, are you aware that we are going to lose the team if we don't repeal the charter? I didn't know that.
So the charter wasn't really brought up to?
Never. I mean, council people never read the charter, I can tell you that. We didn't, who reads it? You read it when you have to what section we're being referred to for what reason, and this happened to be about the ballparks.
And are there any other people that you think maybe deserve some more credit than what they're talked about, aside from those two?
Oh, they were the main two, as far as I saw it. And of course, you can't take away the role that Governor Schaefer had once he became governor. Because if he hadn't taken it and moved it through, it would not have happened.
And last one for me, I know you talked a lot about, wanting to be a big league, big league city, big league town. Did it feel like that was in danger as there was threats to potentially leave?
Oh, deep down, I thought that we were going to lose the team if we didn't build a new ballpark, without a doubt. And when we started the process to try to get the charter amendment repealed, and I would have interaction a lot, mostly with Larry Lucchino, who was, I would call him like the chief of staff under the owner, Edward Bennett Williams. And we had a lot of conversations, and he would say, he may move the team if we don't build a new ballpark. And then he said he's also advocating a single-purpose stadium because both teams shared Memorial Stadium. You guys wouldn't believe there were times when the Colts would play potentially on a Sunday and the Orioles on a Monday, or vice versa, and the field had to be completely refigured, and it was really amazing. The Colts would sometimes play on the infield dirt, which you'd never see happen today. The pitcher's mound had to be taken down and then rebuilt for the baseball. It would be coming back in a day or two. So it worked. For some, it always worked out. And the solution worked out too when the governor became the governor who he was.
I'm sorry, I lied about that being my last question because now I got to follow up. You mentioned sort of thinking that they were going to move. When did that viewpoint shift where you started to believe that the Orioles would stay in Baltimore?
I guess after the charter amendment was repealed, so that the owner then knew that he could talk to the governor about a new ballpark, which is what I believe happened. Then Mr. Williams can go right to Governor Schaefer and say, I'm staying. If you build me a new stadium, I'm staying. I wasn't privy to those conversations, I can tell you that, but I'm sure, because Mr. Williams stayed through 1989, the team. He was the owner from 79 to 89.
Just one last question I thought of here. When you look back over these past, 30 plus years since Camden Yards has been built, can you kind of describe or quantify what you think the impact has had, not only on Camden Yards being a blueprint for other stadiums, but just what it means for it to be here in Baltimore?
Rephrase that.
Can you sort of describe what the impact do you think that Camden Yards has had on the city of Baltimore, economically, as a stadium itself, as a...
Well, I guess we could probably look at numbers and find out what it really means, because we had to do some of that in our research when people that were opposed to it said it's going to cost us too much money to build it. I don't know that you can find people today that would be against it. It's a great revenue stream. The ticket sales and concessions and parking and visitors that see the city when they come in. And here we are at Babe Ruth Museum as an example. When the Yankees come in here in April, the 3,000 people will come through here in like 3 days. And that helps keep this museum going. And they'll be going to the restaurants, be staying at the hotels and stuff like that. And it's a thing to do. Going to an Oriole game, going to a Raven game, it's the thing to do. I mean, you can see tailgating and the excitement when the Ravens have a game. It starts 6 a.m. in the morning when the game's at 1 o'clock. People are it's all they talk about, and it's all they like. A lot of fans, that's what they live for.
So would you consider Camden Yards to be sort of like an iconic structure?
Oh, I think so, definitely. And it was it's one of the first that Janet Marie Smith and that gang that put that together. She did more things in Fenway Park also when they took the left field and extended more seating in Boston. And I think she was with the Dodgers too with some facility out there. That was the best stadium in the country. It might still be viewed by many as the best ballpark in the country.
Professor, is there anything we didn't touch on?
I have two things I want to press you on. When you walked in the first time, whether it was an exhibition game or not, what did you think about the style, the design of this stadium?
I liked it. I liked the only potential controversy was whether the warehouse was going to stay in place. And there was people that wanted it to be torn down and others that wanted it to remain. And when I was pushing Port Covington, after I had seen renderings that it may go at Port Covington, you could hit a home run and it would go into the Patapsco River. And that was a feature of Port Covington. But when I saw, I know it's going to be one or the other, and I thought Port Covington could have been the location because they had to demolish $75 million to demolish the properties along the Inner Harbor there to build Camden Yards, which you wouldn't have had to do at Port Covington. It was just flat railroad property right there, which is now the Baltimore Peninsula, which if you take a tour of that, you'll see what could have been done there.
But what did you think of the design of
The design,
yards?
I was okay with it. I
So
mean,
it didn't wow you?
I wasn't really surprised because I had seen it as it was growing.
So when you
No.
first saw the design, way back the first time when they said, here's what it's gonna look like, it's gonna have steel trusses, it's gonna be brick, it's not gonna be a concrete donut, what did you think?
I guess I would have said, wow, that's pretty great. I mean,
Okay,
you know, I didn't, as a kid growing up, you went to Memorial Stadium, you found your seat. As an adult, you went to Oriole Park, and it's very attractive, obviously. Now they're going back and forth over how far out the left field wall should be. They brought it in last year. Now they putting it back again a little bit. I liked it where it was to start with, as far as ambiance and whatnot. It was perfect, really. I mean, they call it the cookie cutter ballpark for the rest of the stadiums that ensued after that.
and another thing to press you on, you said Lucchino said to you, he may move the team.
Well,
Can
mostly,
you define, in your conversations with Lucchino, how far did Lucchino go?
the inference was made in the fact that he said, look, if you're going to get the charter repealed, I want a single purpose stadium. So that was still like I wouldn't call it a threat. It was just, you know, if we're going to do this, let's do it for just baseball.
So what did he ever say to you about the stability of the team here, or the team might move? What did he ever say?
Well, basically, he said it was, if we don't get a new ballpark, they could go. That Edward Bennett Williams was the most prominent attorney at the time in D.C. He was part of the Democratic National Committee and everything. And we were saying, gee, he might move the team if we don't get a new ballpark.